Hello, everyone. Um, Nice to be with you all again this morning. Thank you, Natalie, for joining us for this year's Wisha Fest. So we met last year during Lisa Gansky's MESH event, and we had a great discussion about what we could do to foster the sharing economy movement. And we got in touch again a month later, and at that time you shared with me the idea of launching peers.org. So for those of you who don't know, Natalie has been working for 13 years at the intersection between technologies and social change. For between 2010 and 2012, you've run the digital team for President Obama. So first of all, I would like to hear you about how you've been using technologies for the last 13 years, and how this use has evolved over time, and how did that lead to your role with President Obama and the creation of peers.org?
It's a small question, Antonin. First of all, I want to say it's wonderful to be here. When I met Antonin, he walked up in front of the crowd of 200 folks and made them all do this thing. Do you guys still do this?
Yeah, sometimes like this.
Yeah, like this, the We Share sign, and then snapped a photo of all these folks making these beautiful We Share signs. So yeah, it's really wonderful to be here. I bring greetings from the Peers team, who are scattered across the United States, and we're very jealous that I was able to come to Paris. And so the question is, how has digital evolved, and how are we bringing it to work at Peers? So I spent my early years as a community organizer, which means that I believe people coming together to create collective action is what creates social change. And was doing that in the traditional way, where you knock on doors and you talk to people, you knock on doors, you make more phone calls, you talk to people, you bring people together. And went to work at moveon.org, which was a phenomenon in American politics shortly after the internet came around. And we realized quickly the power of scale that technology could bring to something like organizing. Could send an email out, and then hundreds of press conferences would happen shortly thereafter. And so decided to really pursue the technology route, and have really been using technology to bring people together and meet like-minded folks. And was able to do that with President Obama, and we passed healthcare reform, which was a huge victory in American politics. And we actually were able to keep the president's the 14 million people who came together to elect the president continue to organize throughout his term. And so came to realize that I was actually not that inspired by politics anymore, shocking, but that people all over the globe were actually creating solutions separate from where their governments were, talking endlessly, and was really inspired by that people were creating their own economies that they wanted to see. It's the We Share story, it's the shareable story. And knew I wanted to work with people like you, and so have launched Peers. And part of what we do is bring the techniques of running campaigns and bringing people together to help move the sharing economy forward in people's cities.
So the goal of Peers is to protect, grow, and mainstream the sharing economy. Could you explain how you did that over the last year, and what have been the best successes over the last year?
So when we started, we launched Peers about a year ago at this point, and the sharing economy was in a very different state. At this point, I would say, moving forward, we probably will drop the mainstream from our mandate, because I think even in the past year, the understanding of peer-to-peer sharing has grown a lot. And so we started with just an idea, a website, and a small team, and in the past year have gone from 0 to 250,000 members around the globe, most of whom are not in the US, about 60% are around the world. And we've launched dozens of campaigns. So our members launch campaigns to move the sharing economy forward. We have built a tool at peers.org that you can go and start a campaign and drive it forward. So a few examples, a guy named Noah in Portland is petitioning his city to bring bike share to Portland, Oregon. A woman named Bernadette in Virginia. She is a mother of 5. She's a farmer. And she says she makes the best sweet potato pie in the state of Virginia. But she'd go to jail if she sold it to you. Because in Virginia, they have very strict laws about peer-to-peer sales. And so she's advocating for a piece of legislation that would allow small cottage food makers and vegetable farmers to be able to sell their vegetables in their town. And if she does this, her husband, who works construction, would be able to stay home. He travels 6 months of the year and put his labor into his own family farm, and they'd be able to make a living that way. So she launched a campaign at Peers, and thousands of people have joined her, and she's in meetings now with the officials of her state, and I think she has a good shot at passing this legislation in the upcoming session. So she's, I think, a great example of what Peers can do for people who are fighting alone, but they don't have to be fighting alone because there's a lot of people who sort of support their effort. So that's the one big thing on the campaigning side. But the other thing that I've been really inspired by are Peers members getting together around the globe. So we share, much like the social fabric that exists here, we're trying to help spur that in the places where we share doesn't exist yet. And so 3 months into launching, we said, hey, I would love to get together with Peers for dinner. Like, who are they? Let's like go talk about the sharing economy. What is the sharing economy? The conversations that we probably all endlessly have into the night. And asked Peers members to hold dinners, and they did in a distributed way. And so in 120 cities around the globe, shortly after launching, people held a Peers dinner to come together and break bread and talk about the sharing economy.
And what did you learn from this experience?
Well, one thing we learned is that the people who are inspired by peer-to-peer sharing and the collaborative economy don't just exist in big cities. There's a lot in big cities around the world, but they also, it was all gatherings in very small cities and rural places, which I thought was really quite interesting. The other thing is it's a whole breadth of people. There's people who've been doing this for decades, and this is the thing that they're inspired by, and there's people newly turned on to the sharing economy, and they don't know each other. And so part of what we want to do is help create forums where that can happen.
Do you believe that there is a culture emerging around the sharing economy or the collaborative economy, or there are very different perspectives, ways of personally living the movement? How do you see people connecting to the sharing economy around the globe? Is it the same way in the US, a different way here in Europe?
Well, I'd also love to know what you think. I see an ecosystem being created. There's people who are really into the policy side of this, and they are gravitating toward conversations with lawmakers and what would a sort of national scale policy look like versus very local policy fights, which is what's happening right now. There are people who are inspired by creating new version, the entrepreneurs. There's a set of people that we're really tuning into right now that are starting to make a living pretty solely in the peer-to-peer sharing space, either by making money or saving money, depending on, using items that they already have. And so we've been thinking a lot about those people who I believe someone is calling income entrepreneurs, or the supply side of the market, or providers, as we say. And those people are outside of traditional employers. So what kind of support will they need as they're sort of a new, workforce? So and then there's, of course, thought leaders. And that's a lot of what I think is happening here, really heady conversation around the sharing economy. So there's a big ecosystem, and we're not all going to agree. And I think that's okay and very healthy.
And so, what is the future for those people who are starting to make a living in the sharing economy? Because sometimes, they are freelancers. They might not have like the social welfare or social benefits people in the normal job market might benefit from. So, what could we provide to those people so that they are also in a better social situation than they are now?
Yeah, I think so. This is, I think, a really interesting question. Peers is built by the people who are building the sharing economy around the globe, and so part of what we're looking at is what can we provide this space to support people who are participating in this activity. And increasingly, there's a small but vibrant number of people who are doing this. And so I think some of the questions are, what could people create together? Sarah Horowitz, who runs the Freelancers Union, has, I think, done some really interesting thinking around this for freelancers in the United States. So I think our question is, what can peer-to-peer entrepreneurs, what do they need? How could they collectively create things like maternity leave and sick leave? Where does healthcare come from? Where do you open up retirement accounts? Things that you would get in the U.S. Via a traditional employer that you can't get, as a temporary worker. And how can we help create those things? So we've been working with a set of income entrepreneurs in different cities to kind of start to experiment with what does a modern day guild look like? It's not quite a union because people don't have employers, but what would a modern day guild where people who are sharing their homes, they're sharing their cars, stuff, time, people, money, skills, what would it look like?
And do you have any ideas on this? Like, do you think it's going to be built in each country, or like should we have like a global freelancers union? What is the role also of the sharing economy platforms in maybe helping providing this? Do you have any clue on this?
Yeah, well, I think these are all very good questions, and actually would love to work with WeShare to answer a lot of these questions. I think the situation looks different in every country. The one I know the best is the US, and that is where we have a social safety net that's unraveling. So the macroeconomic trends are not going in the favor of the worker. And then you also have a set of people who are choosing to step outside of a traditional 9-to-5 job and are able to do that because of a lot of peer sharing, experiences. I think it's interesting to think about what the platform should provide versus the people. I think that's actually going to be an important question. Many years ago, labor in the United States chose to put benefits with employers. And one of the byproducts of that is that people feel very locked into their job in order to keep something like healthcare or keep their different benefits. And so I think there's a certain freedom that we're experiencing today. That's the upside of some of these macroeconomic trends. And so I think that we can learn from that. I actually think people turning to each other to create a lot of these sort of mutual aid circles is maybe where we should go.
Have you already run a campaign in Europe with peers? I think not yet. In Europe?
Yeah, so we've really, we're only a year in, and we've really focused on the area that we know best, and also where there's a lot more legal problems with the sharing economy. So the work we've done in Europe has been more community building. Dinners, we did clothing swaps timed with Fashion Week. So in about 75 cities around the globe, people came together when Fashion Week went through Milan, Paris, and New York, and did clothing swaps. And they were, big clothing swaps held at startup offices and homes and churches and basements, down to small clothing swaps. I know Yurtle held a big swap in San Francisco that like 100 people attended. And so that was quite fun.
Because right now there is a very complicated situation in Spain and Brussels, Belgium, around the sharing economy. So recently, I think the city of Brussels banned not only on-demand or peer-to-peer ride-sharing in the city, but also Airbnb and couchsurfing. In Spain, they are starting to have legal issues with long-distance ride-sharing. Yeah. So what would be your advice for both entrepreneurs and users in those countries and cities if they want to run a campaign to protect the services that started in those countries?
Well, so number one, go to peers.org, and we would love to support people who are fighting those campaigns. You know, the thing is, we'll do our best. The best work happens when there's people on the ground in that city who are driving the campaign forward. And then peers can help bring in a global, you know, support network with them. But I think, you know, it's really important if you believe, if this is something you want to fight for, to fight. Because I believe these types of campaigns aren't won just with the inside game, right? Just by hiring lobbyists and policy experts. They're actually won by organizing people who believe in, and that these peer economy, you know, models are really important to their lives. And that there is a passionate group of people out there who believe that. And so our job is to, you know, find them and make sure that their voice is heard in the system. So I think the biggest thing to do is to, you know, figure out who can make the decision that you want made in the world, either to legalize something, you know, or to stop a cease and desist or whatever it is, and really, you know, start to bring the voices of people to bear on that person, to have a very clear, what I call theory of change. How can, you know, this group of people make this action happen?
So last question, you're organizing a big event around the sharing economy in 10 days in San Francisco called Share?
Yes, share.
And so,
Catalyzing the
so what
economy.
is your objective with this event, and what is like the future for peers for the next year?
Yeah. Well, so next week, we're very excited to have a conference in the US. And actually, we're very inspired by We Share Fest. How could we bring together the ecosystem of policymakers and movement makers and entrepreneurs and, you know, individual entrepreneurs, people in their own communities, and create that dialogue. And so that's what we're going to do in coordination with Shareable, and SoCap, Social Capital Markets, and a whole set of other partners. So yeah, I think it's going to be a great conversation. I've actually taken several things I've seen here and experienced here, and we'll be porting them to San Francisco. I'd also like a big We Share sign to take.
We'll provide you that.
Excellent, that'd be great. And you know, I think the future of peers is something that's really exciting. We've just got just about a year under our belts, and we've learned a lot. We've grown a lot, and we're still a very tiny team. And so I think the question moving forward is, you know, what services can peers provide this community that you know, really supports this community?
Thank you.
Thank you.